The first thing I noticed when I opened the front door was the silence, not the normal quiet of an empty house. This was the kind of silence that feels wrong, like the air has been holding its breath for hours. My cheeks went numb the second I stepped inside. The heat was off, not turned down. Off? Thanksgiving was supposed to smell like warm food and cinnamon and old furniture. Instead, it smelled like cold drywall and dust, like somebody had unplugged life and left the cord dangling. My suitcase rolled over something on the entry tile, a folded note. I recognized my mother's handwriting immediately. Tight, neat, certain, like her words were laws. "We're in Cancun, you handle grandma." No greeting, no explanation, no happy Thanksgiving, just an assignment. My fingers tightened around the paper until the edges bent. My throat went tight, but I didn't make a sound. I read it again, slower, because sometimes my brain tries to soften things on the first pass. "You handle grandma," like grandma was a package, like she was a chore. I set my suitcase down and walked toward the living room. My boots squeaked on the hardwood because the floors were that cold. Every step felt too loud, like the house was amplifying my presence. "Grandma," I called. Nothing. I tried again louder. "Grandma, it's me." Still nothing. My stomach tightened into that sick, familiar feeling, the one that shows up right before your mind catches up to what your body already knows. Then I saw her. She was on the floor near the couch, half curled like she tried to get up and couldn't. Her nightgown was twisted, one slipper was missing, her hair was flattened on one side, like she'd been there long enough for gravity to make decisions. Her skin looked gray in the dim light, not pale, gray. My brain went cold and clear. I dropped to my knees beside her. "Grandma, hey, look at me." Her eyelids fluttered, her lips moved, but no sound came out at first. Her hand, thin, trembling, found my wrist and clamped down with surprising strength. I glanced around, scanning the room like I could find an answer stuck to the walls. The space heater that usually sat by her recliner wasn't there, the lamp was unplugged, and the thermostat display in the hallway was black. I followed the cord with my eyes. The heater plug had been pulled from the wall and left hanging loose like a choice someone made on purpose. My stomach flipped. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and my thumb froze. No signal, not weak signal, nothing. That made no sense here. This house always had signal. Then I realized what else was missing. The landline phone on the side table was gone, not knocked over, not off the hook, gone. The spot where it should have been was clean, like someone lifted it carefully and carried it away. My mouth went dry. I looked at Grandma again. Her eyes were open now barely, but they found mine. "Call," she whispered. "I'm calling," I said, and even as I said it, I was already moving. I ran to the kitchen window, pressed my phone to the glass, lifted it higher, lower, higher again, like signal was something you could hunt. One bar flickered in and out like a dying heartbeat. I didn't waste time bargaining with it. I hit 911 the second the bar stayed long enough. It rang once, then connected. "911, what's your emergency?" "My grandmother is on the floor," I said, voice controlled and tight. "She's cold, she's not okay, I need an ambulance." "The house has no heat." "Is she breathing?" "Yes," I said, "but she's weak." "Any bleeding?" "No." "What's the address?" I gave it. I gave my name. I answered questions like a checklist because panic doesn't get EMTs here faster, details do. When I ended the call, I ran back to Grandma and slipped my coat under her shoulders, trying to get her off the cold floor without moving her wrong. Her skin felt like winter, not cold hands. "Winter?" I swallowed hard and kept my voice low. "You're okay," I told her. "Help is coming." Her fingers tightened on my wrist again like she needed to anchor herself, and then she whispered something that made my blood turn even colder. "Don't tell them yet." I blinked. "Tell who?" Her gaze flicked toward the hallway, toward the front door, toward the place my mother's note had been. "They'll come back," she breathed, "and they'll lie." My throat tightened, but my voice stayed steady. "Grandma, you need help right now." "I know," she whispered, "but listen." Her hand shook as she reached toward her chest. For a second, I thought she was grabbing at pain, then I realized she was trying to reach inside the collar of her nightgown. "Grandma," she pressed something into my palm. It was small, hard, cold, a key, not a house key. The teeth were wrong, smaller like a desk key or a lockbox key. Then she curled my fingers around it like she was closing a secret. Utility, she whispered, behind her voice cut out as she shivered and her eyes fluttered. Behind the what? I asked, leaning in. Grandma, tell me, she swallowed, lips trembling. Behind the pantry, she managed. Don't let her take it. Her grip loosened and I felt a surge of anger so sharp it almost made me dizzy. Her? Not them, not people. Her? My mother. I looked around the room again and suddenly everything looked different. Not like a house, but like a staged crime scene. No phone, heater unplugged, thermostat dead, and a note that sounded like an order. My grandmother didn't fall, she was left. The sirens arrived fast, too fast for how long Grandma must have been there. Red light washed across the living room walls, pulsing like a heartbeat the house didn't deserve. 2 EMTs came in with a stretcher and a medical bag. A third, a firefighter followed with a flashlight. Ma'am, step back, one EMT said gently. I did, but my eyes stayed glued to Grandma as they checked her pulse, her temperature, her oxygen. One of them frowned hard. She's hypothermic, he said to the other. How long has the heat been off? I don't know, I said, I just got here. The firefighter swept the room with his light and stopped at the empty phone table. He looked at me. Where's the house phone? He asked. It's missing, I said. His expression tightened. Missing how gone? I replied. Like someone took it. That did something subtle to the room. Their energy shifted from medical only to something else. Alert, careful, quieter. The EMT looked at me. Who lives here with her? My mother, I said, and my father, but they left. For where? The EMT asked like he already knew. I swallowed once and held up the note. Cancun, I said. He read it quickly, his mouth tightened. Then the firefighter said, we need to document the scene. I nodded, still calm on the outside, even as something inside me kept repeating the same sentence like a drum. They left her to freeze. When they lifted Grandma onto the stretcher, her hand reached for mine again. I leaned close. I'm here, I whispered. Her eyes opened just enough to find me. Her lips moved. Photos, she whispered. What? B photos, she breathed. Proof. My stomach tightened. Where? She didn't answer. Her eyes fluttered and she turned her face slightly like the effort cost too much. The EMT pushed the stretcher toward the door. Ma'am, you're riding with us? Yes, I said immediately. On the porch, neighbors were already out, robes, phones, whispering. Someone filmed openly like my grandmother's suffering was content. I ignored them. I climbed into the ambulance, sat beside the gurney, and watched the EMT adjust blankets and oxygen while the siren started again, and while the ambulance pulled away. I finally let myself do the one thing I hadn't done yet. I opened my mother's social media because if she was actually in Cancun while my grandmother lay on a frozen floor, she wouldn't be able to resist proving it. The page loaded and the first thing that popped up was a bright blue ocean, white sand, and my mother's hand holding a drink in the sunlight. The location tag under it was clear enough to punch me in the throat, Cancun, and the timestamp showed it was posted hours ago while my grandmother was still in the dark. The ambulance was warm, but I couldn't stop shaking, not from the cold anymore, from the picture in my head of Grandma on that floor, heater unplugged like someone had made a decision and walked away. An EMT tucked more blankets around her and kept talking in a calm voice like it could keep her here. Oxygen hissed softly, the heart monitor chirped in steady, little confirmations. I sat close enough that Grandma could see me if she opened her eyes. She didn't, but her fingers kept searching for my wrist like she was afraid I'd disappear. Ma'am, the EMT said. What's her name? June, I answered. June Reed. And yours? Tessa Reed, I said. Relationship? My grandmother. He nodded, then lowered his voice. How long was she on the floor? I didn't guess. I didn't soften it. I don't know, I said, but the house was freezing, the heat was off, and the phone was gone. That got his attention. He leaned toward his partner. Missing phone, he murmured. Possible neglect. I stared straight ahead and opened my mother's social media again, thumb steady, even though my stomach felt like a clenched fist. The ocean photo loaded fully this time, my mother's hand holding a bright drink, a manicured nail, sunlight so loud it looked fake, my sister's laugh captured in the corner of the frame, and under it in tiny cheerful letters that made me want to break something, Cancun, Mexico. The timestamp showed it was posted while my grandmother was still alone. I took screenshots, not one, several, with the time visible, with the location visible. I opened the comments and captured those too because people were congratulating her like she was on a honeymoon, not abandoning an old woman in the dark. Then I did one more thing. I hit the three-dot menu and copied the post link because screenshots are emotional, links are procedural. At the ER, they moved fast. Nurses cut away Grandma's damp nightgown and wrapped her in heated blankets. Someone placed warm packs under her arms. A doctor pressed 2 fingers to her wrist and frowned hard. Her core temperature is low, he said, eyes on the monitor. We're treating hypothermia and dehydration. I swallowed. She could have died. He didn't reassure me with comfort, he reassured me with truth. Yes, he said, like she could have. A nurse asked who is her primary caregiver. I felt my jaw tighten. My mother, I said. She lives with her. The nurse paused mid-typing. Where is your mother? In Cancun, I answered, and I handed the nurse my phone with the beach photo pulled up. The nurse's face didn't go dramatic, it went still. I'm going to notify the social worker. Oh, she said quietly, taking the phone back gently like it was evidence. A social worker arrived within minutes, clipboard tight to her chest like a shield. Her badge read, M. Delgado. She spoke softly, but her eyes were sharp. Tessa, she said, I need you to tell me what you found when you arrived. So, I told her in clean facts: the icy house, the note, the heater unplugged, the missing landline phone, the dead thermostat, Grandma on the floor, Grandma whispering, don't tell them yet. M. Delgado didn't interrupt, she just wrote. When I finished, she asked one question that cut straight through the noise. Do you believe this was intentional? I didn't hesitate. Yes, I said. She nodded once like she'd already reached the same conclusion. I'm filing a report for suspected neglect. And she said, Adult Protective Services will be involved. The hospital will document her condition. The police may also respond. Good, because my mother's favorite trick is making everything sound like a misunderstanding. A hypothermia chart isn't a misunderstanding. A missing phone isn't a misunderstanding. A beach photo timestamp isn't a misunderstanding. A uniformed officer arrived while Grandma was still being stabilized. He introduced himself as Officer Lewis and asked to speak with me in the hallway. What happened? He said. I gave him the same facts. Then I showed him the note. He read it once, then again, his mouth tightening. They left an elderly woman alone with no heat, he said quietly, and took the phone. I added it wasn't there. He looked at me. Do you have any reason to think someone entered the house? I remembered Grandma's grip on my wrist, her warning. They live there, I said, but yes, I think they staged it. Lewis nodded slowly. I'm going to take an initial report, he said. We'll need photos of the conditions in the home: heat, thermostat, any unplugged appliances, missing phone area. I can take you, I said. He studied my face like he was measuring whether I'd collapse. Then he said, do not contact them yet. I felt the corners of my mouth tighten, not into a smile, into agreement. I wasn't going to, I said. We drove back to the house with the sun barely thinking about coming up. The street looked normal again, no sirens now, but the cold inside hit me the moment I opened the door, like the house was still accusing whoever left it that way. Officer Lewis stepped in, flashlight sweeping. Thermostat, he said. I led him to the hallway. The screen was still dead. Lewis lifted the casing carefully and frowned. No power, he muttered. Breaker off. I didn't touch anything, I said. He walked to the panel and checked. The breaker wasn't tripped. Someone didn't lose power. Someone turned the heat off at the source and left the house to freeze. Lewis photographed the thermostat, then the heater cord hanging loose near Grandma's chair. He photographed the empty spot where the landline should have been. Phone missing, he said, voice tightening. That matters, I nodded, then remembered the key in my pocket, the cold metal pressing against my skin like a reminder. Grandma told me something, I said, before the EMTs took her. Lewis looked at me. What? She said. Behind the pantry, I replied, and she pressed this into my hand. I opened my palm. Louis stared at the small key. What's it for? I don't know. I said, but she told me not to let my mother take it. We walked to the pantry together. It was a narrow door beside the kitchen full of canned food and old cookbooks. I pulled everything out fast but carefully because if Grandpa taught Grandma anything, it was to hide things where people don't look twice. Behind the bottom shelf, my fingers found a seam in the drywall, a loose panel. My stomach tightened. I slid the key into a small metal latch tucked behind the wood trim. It turned with a soft click that sounded way too quiet for how loud it felt in my chest. The panel opened. Inside was a shallow cavity, and inside that, a small lock box, not fancy, not new, the kind people buy when they're hiding something from the people who live with them. Officer Lewis leaned closer. Open it. My hand stayed steady as I used the key. The lid popped. Inside was a prepaid flip phone powered off, a stack of printed documents folded tightly and a sealed envelope with my name written across the front in Grandma's shaky handwriting. Tessa, don't give this to your mother. I looked at Louis. This is why, I said quietly. He nodded once. Open it, he said, and whatever it is, we document it. I slid my finger under the envelope flap and the first thing I saw inside made my blood go cold because it wasn't a letter. It was a photo print out, a bright blue ocean, a familiar hand holding a drink, and in the corner of the frame, reflected in the glass behind them was something my mother didn't realize she'd captured, a date, a timestamp, and the fact that they'd been in Cancun longer than the note claimed, long enough that my grandmother's accident didn't look like an accident at all. I didn't stand there staring at the printout like it was a punchline. I laid everything out on the kitchen table the way I'd seen nurses do with instruments, clean, deliberate, no wasted motion. Officer Lewis put on gloves. He didn't touch anything yet. He watched me, then the lockbox, then the empty space where the landline should have been. Go slow, he said. If there's proof, we preserve it. I nodded and unfolded the stack of documents first. They weren't random papers, they were organized, clipped, labeled in Grandma's shaky handwriting, not elegant, but intentional. One page was a simple printed itinerary, flight confirmation screenshots, dates circled in pen. Another page was a list of medication times. Another was a handwritten note that looked like it had been rewritten more than once. If I'm on the floor, it wasn't a fall. The heat was turned off. The phone was taken. The note was left to make it sound normal. My throat tightened, but my hand stayed steady. Lewis leaned closer. She wrote that before today, he said. Yes, I whispered, which meant Grandma wasn't surprised by being abandoned. She expected it. I picked up the prepaid flip phone next. It felt too light to hold something heavy, but I could already tell it did. There was a strip of tape on the back with 2 words written in ink. Video proof. Lewis nodded once. Power it on. I flipped it open and held the power button. The screen lit up weakly like it hadn't been used in days. A low battery icon blinked in the corner. No signal bars. Of course, if the house phone was gone and the cell signal was spotty, Grandma's backup had been turned into a brick, too, but it didn't need signal to do what it had already done. I tapped into the gallery. There was one video, one dated 2 days ago, timestamped mid-after afternoon. My stomach turned cold. I hit play. The footage was grainy, shot from a low angle like the phone had been propped behind something. The kitchen came into view, my mother moving through it like she owned every molecule. My father's voice drifted in from off camera. Just leave it, he said. My mother scoffed. If we leave it, she'll call, she snapped. Then she stepped into frame, bent down, and unplugged the space heater cord from the wall near Grandma's chair. She didn't fumble, she didn't hesitate, she did it like flipping a switch. Then she walked to the side table and lifted the landline phone off its base. My throat went tight. She turned it over, unplugged it, and held it for a second like she was deciding whether to feel guilty. She didn't. She tucked it under her arm and said clear as day, she can't call anyone if she can't reach anyone. My father muttered, Elaine. My mother cut him off. We'll be back in a few days. Tessa will handle it, she always does. Then she leaned down toward the camera, not because she knew it was there, because she was speaking toward the living room where Grandma must have been. And you, she said, voice suddenly sweet and sharp at the same time, you stay in your chair and you don't start anything while we're gone. She straightened, grabbed the notepad from the counter, and scribbled on it quickly. her hand moving in that tight, neat handwriting I had seen on the entry note. Then she slapped the note on the counter and walked out of frame with the phone. The video ended with the kitchen light flicking off. I stared at the blank screen for a long moment, my pulse steady and heavy. Louis exhaled slowly through his nose. "That's intentional," he said. I didn't answer because there was nothing to add. He took the phone gently from my hands and held it like evidence. "Now, this is elder abuse," he said, "criminal neglect at minimum, and removing the phone is isolation that matters." My mouth was dry. "She left her on purpose," I said. Louis nodded once. "And she documented it for you with that note," he replied, glancing at the Cancun printout still on the table. "Now we document it for court." He pulled out an evidence bag and slid the flip phone inside, sealing it carefully. Then he pointed at the printed beach photo and the screenshot pages. "These two," he said, "we'll take originals if possible. If not, we photograph, preserve, and subpoena platform data later." I held up my phone. "I have screenshots with timestamps," I said, "and the link." "Good," he replied, "that's corroboration." He photographed the kitchen, the pantry panel, the empty landline spot, the unplugged heater cord. He photographed the note on the entry tile where I'd found it. He photographed the thermostat display dead in the hallway. Then he stepped back and looked at me, eyes sharp. "Where's your mother right now?" he asked. "In Cancun," I said. According to her. Louis didn't soften it. "We're going to verify," he said, "and we're going to locate her." I felt my stomach tighten. "They'll come back," I said quietly. Louis nodded. "Then we decide what they come back to," he replied. He made a call from his radio low and quick. I caught phrases: suspected elder neglect, video evidence, family caregivers left state, removal of phone, hypothermia at ER. Then he asked me for grandma's full name and date of birth. I gave it. He asked for my mother's name and date of birth. I gave it too, and my jaw tightened as I said it because saying her name in that context felt like cutting a cord. "Do you have a copy of any caregiving arrangement?" he asked. I looked at the papers again and found another page, one I hadn't noticed because it was folded into a smaller square, a power bill history, not the full account, just printed summaries. The last 2 weeks were circled and Grandma had written one line beside them: "Heat usage dropped to 0. Louis stared at it. "Utility logs," he said, "that's proof of time." Then he found one more sheet, an email from a home health agency dated weeks ago. It said services were cancelled at caregiver request, like a mother's request. Louis's mouth tightened. "She cut off outside oversight," he said. I swallowed. "Grandma tried to prepare," I said, voice tight. "She did," he replied, "and she saved you." A text buzzed on my phone, then another, then my screen lit up with my mother's name, Allah. I didn't answer, I didn't move. Louis watched the screen, then looked at me. "Put it on speaker," he said. "Don't say anything beyond identifying yourself. Let her talk." My throat tightened. I hit answer and set it to speaker. My mother's voice came through bright and sharp like she was annoyed I'd made her wait. "Tessa," she snapped, "why are you calling ambulances? What are you doing?" I kept my voice flat. "Grandma needed help," I said. My mother exhaled dramatically like I'd inconvenienced her. "She fell," she said quickly. "That's what she does. She refuses to use her walker. Don't turn this into a big thing." Louise's eyes narrowed slightly. I kept my tone controlled. "The heat was off," I said. A beat of silence. Then my mother's voice changed, only slightly, but enough. "We turned it down," she said. "It's expensive, you know that." Louis's gaze flicked to the circled utility sheet on the table. I didn't argue with her, I didn't accuse. I gave her rope. "And the phone," I said calmly. "Why was the phone gone?" My mother laughed once, too sharp to be natural. "What phone, Tessa? Stop, you're always so dramatic." Louis leaned in slightly and mouthed, "Ask where she is." I did. "Where are you right now?" I asked. My mother didn't hesitate. "At the beach," she said, "trying to have one peaceful trip before your grandfather's mess gets sorted." My stomach turned cold. "Grandpa's mess." Louis held up one finger, signaling me to stop talking. My mother kept going, steamrolling like she always did when she sensed she could. "Handle your grandmother," she said. That's what family does. Don't involve strangers and do you hear me? Do not tell anyone at probate anything about this. There it was, not worry, not confusion, instruction control. Lewis's face went still. He pressed the record function on his body mic. My mother's voice continued, irritated now. If you embarrass me, I swear. Lewis reached over and ended the call. I stared at him, breath tight. He didn't apologize, he didn't explain softly, he said it clean. She just told you not to report elder neglect before probate, he said. That's consciousness of guilt. My throat tightened. What happens now? I asked. Lewis looked at the evidence bag with the phone inside, then at the documents, then at me. Now, he said, we coordinate with APS and detectives, we verify their travel, we notify the probate court through your attorney that an elder neglect investigation is active, and when your mother comes back from Cancun, he paused and his voice dropped into something final, she doesn't come back to a family conversation, she comes back to charges. My stomach clenched hard, not from fear, from the sudden, clear certainty that my mother's favorite tactic was about to fail, because Grandma had done the one thing my mother never planned for, she left proof. Lewis didn't say charges like it was a threat, he said it like it was the natural outcome of what my mother had done. An hour later, I was back at the hospital sitting in a small consultation room that smelled like coffee and sanitizer. The fluorescent light made everything feel too honest. Miss Delgado, the social worker, was there with a new woman who introduced herself as Janice Patel from Adult Protective Services. Officer Lewis stood by the door and a detective I hadn't met yet walked in with a tired face and a clean notebook. Detective Harlan Shaw, he said, Elder Crimes. I didn't flinch at the title, I just nodded and slid the lockbox envelope across the table. We have a video, I said, and a missing landline phone and hypothermia. Shaw's eyes tightened. Show me, he said. Lewis placed the sealed evidence bag with a flip phone on the table, then opened his own device and played the copied clip the hospital had authorized him to display. My mother's voice filled the room again, sweet and sharp. She can't call anyone if she can't reach anyone. Janice Patel didn't react with shock, she reacted with a small, grim stillness, like she'd heard too many versions of this and hated all of them. Detective Shaw paused the video on the frame where my mother's hand unplugged the heater cord. He tapped his pen once. This, he said, is not an accident. Delgado nodded. Her temperature on arrival supports prolonged exposure, she said quietly, and dehydration. Shaw looked at me. Where are your mother and father right now? In Cancun, I said. They left a note. I slid the note forward. Janice photographed it immediately without being asked. Shaw asked, do they have a return date? I don't know, I said, but my mother's posts show they've been there longer than the note claims. I handed him the beach photo printout with the reflection timestamp, then I handed him my screenshots of her social post with the location tag and time. He studied them, then looked up at me. Did your grandmother tell you not to tell them? He asked. Yes, I said. She said they would lie. That landed differently in a room full of professionals. It wasn't just a family whisper, it was a warning from a victim who knew her caregivers would weaponize the narrative. Shaw nodded once. We're going to pull hospital security logs, he said. We're also going to request the home's utility usage and phone service records. If the landline was removed to isolate her, that's a separate aggravating factor, Janice added, and we're going to establish a safety plan. Your grandmother cannot be discharged back to that home under their care. My throat tightened. Good, I said, because she'll die. No one argued with me. Then Ms. Delgado's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at the screen and her expression changed slightly. It's the nurse's station, she said. She answered, listened for a moment, then put it on speaker without asking my permission. Her tone stayed professional, but I heard the edge. Yes, this is Delgado. The charge nurse's voice came through tight. We have a woman on the phone claiming she's June Reed's primary caregiver. She's demanding to speak to a doctor and arrange discharge. She's very insistent. My stomach went cold. Miss Delgado didn't look at me, she looked at Shaw. Shaw nodded slightly. Delgado spoke into the phone, calm and sharp. Do you have her name? Elaine Weston, the nurse that said she says she's the daughter and that the granddaughter is overreacting. Janice Patel's mouth tightened. Ms. Delgado asked, "Is she physically here?" "No," the nurse replied, "she's calling from an international number." International, even from a hospital phone line? My mother couldn't resist controlling the scene. Delgado's voice stayed even. "Do not discuss medical details with her," she said. "Do not discuss discharge. I'm placing a protective hold pending APS review. If she continues, route her to hospital administration." The nurse exhaled audibly. "Understood, Ms." Delgado ended the call and looked at me gently for the first time. "Your mother is already trying to get ahead of the record," she said. Detective Shaw leaned forward slightly. "She doesn't want the hospital documenting prolonged exposure," he said. "She wants a fall and a quick discharge." I swallowed. "She's trying to erase the timeline." Shaw nodded once. "And she just created more evidence," he replied. "Hoss call logs will show when she contacted staff and from where." Janice Patel added, "If she attempts to impersonate a guardian or make medical decisions while out of state, that's another problem for her." My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I didn't have to look to know who it was, but I did anyway. "Elaine," then a second call, then a text that made my stomach tighten. "Stop talking to police, you're going to ruin everything." I didn't respond. I screenshotted it and slid the phone across to Detective Shaw without a word. He stared at it for a beat, then nodded slowly. "Good," he said, "keep sending those to us." I felt my pulse stay steady, heavy. That's what my mother never understood about me. "If you threaten me, you're giving me a document." A hospital admin came in a few minutes later, asked for brief statements, and left with Ms. Delgado to coordinate restrictions. Detective Shaw stood and said, "We're going to a judge today for emergency orders." "Ord for what?" I asked. "Protective orders around your grandmother's care," was he said, "and to seize any property they removed, like the landline, if we can establish it was taken to isolate her." Added quietly, "They think they're controlling the story from a beach." Janice Patel looked at me. "You have an attorney?" she asked. "I have one for Grandpa's probate." I said. "What's their name?" she asked. "Delia Klein," I replied. Janet nodded. "Call her," she said. Now I stepped into the hallway and called Delia. She answered immediately, voice already moving fast. "Tessa," she said, "I heard something happened. My grandmother was found hypothermic." I said, "My parents left her alone. They took the phone. There's video." There was a short silence, just enough for Delia to shift gears into pure law. "Okay," she said, "listen to me carefully. Your mother filed something." My stomach tightened. "What did she file?" "An emergency petition." Delia said she's asking the probate court to appoint her temporary administrator and to remove you as personal representative candidate on fitness grounds. I leaned my shoulder against the hospital wall, eyes closing for half a second. "Based on what?" She attached a statement claiming you refuse to care for June and that you're unreliable, Delia said, and she references a medical emergency at the home. My throat tightened. "She's using the emergency she created." "Yes," Delia said, voice flat with disgust, "and she filed it last night." "Last night," I repeated. Dahlia's voice sharpened. "Before you even arrived," she said, "which means she anticipated this becoming a problem and wanted the filing timestamp first." My hands went cold. "What do we do?" Delia didn't hesitate. "We crush it with evidence," she said. "I want the police report number. I want the hospital's preliminary findings. I want the social worker's whole documentation. And I want the screenshots of her posts in Cancun with timestamps." "You'll have them," I said, and Tessa, Delia added. "Probate court is not going to enjoy being played with emergency services and elder neglect, but you need to be there when the judge reads it." "I'll be there," I said. "Good," she replied. "Hearing is tomorrow morning." First thing, tomorrow morning. My mother timed it so that while June lay in a hospital bed, she could walk into court with a clean outfit and a dirty story. I ended the call and went back into the consultation room. Shaw was already standing, ready to move. "She filed an emergency petition," I said. "Probate. She's trying to take control of Grandpa's estate using this." Shaw's eyes narrowed. "We'll send an investigative letter to the court." "Massa," he said, "active elder neglect case, evidence preserved, caller contact logs." Janice Patel nodded. "And we'll provide APS documentation," she said. "No discharge to caregiver." Lewis looked at me. "Your mother thought she could freeze an old woman and warm her hands on the inheritance." he said quietly. My jaw tightened. She won't, I replied. That night, I didn't go home. I stayed at the hospital, sitting in a vinyl chair beside June's bed while the machines beeped, and the heater hummed softly above the door like a promise the house never kept. Grandma opened her eyes once around midnight. Her gaze found me. Her hand reached out and I took it. You did good, she whispered. I swallowed hard. You saved yourself, I said. She squeezed my fingers weakly. She'll come, she breathed, and she'll smile. My throat tightened. Letter, I said. The next morning, I walked it into probate court with Delia at my side and a folder thick enough to feel like armor. Hospital preliminary notes, APS hold paperwork, the police report number, the heater unplugging video stills, the missing phone documentation, and screenshots of my mother's beach photos in Cancun with timestamps. Across the hallway, Elaine Weston stood by the courtroom doors in a crisp coat like she hadn't left an elderly woman to freeze. My father, Ray, was beside her, jaw clenched, eyes avoiding mine. Elaine's lips curved into a small confident smile like she thought she'd already won, and then the bailiff opened our file, scanned the first attachment, and his expression changed as he read the heading out loud. Criminal investigation, suspected elder neglect and isolation. The courtroom doors opened and the smell hit me first, old paper, floor polish, and the kind of tension families drag in with them like luggage. Elaine Weston walked in ahead of us like she was arriving to collect something she'd already labeled as hers. Her attorney carried a clean stack of filings. My father kept his eyes on the carpet. Delia didn't waste time with greetings. She guided me to counsel table, laid our folder down, and slid copies toward the clerk like she was feeding the court the truth one page at a time. When Judge Halverson took the bench, my mother's attorney stood before anyone even finished sitting. Your Honor, he began smooth and urgent, we filed an emergency petition last night. The judge raised a hand. I saw it, he said, then glanced down at the file the bailiff had opened, and I also see an attachment I did not expect. The bailiff cleared his throat and read the heading again, slower this time, as if he wanted everyone to understand it. Criminal investigation, suspected elder neglect and isolation. My mother's smile faltered just a hair. Her attorney tried to recover air. Your Honor, this is precisely why my client is concerned about the granddaughter's reliability. Delia stood without drama. Your Honor, the hospital placed a protective hold. Adult Protective Services is involved. Police documented the home conditions, and we have video evidence showing Miss Weston unplugging the heater and removing the house phone before leaving the state. The judge's gaze sharpened. Video evidence, he repeated. Yes, Delia said, and nodded once toward the clerk. Filed under seal with chain of custody documentation. My mother's attorney blinked, then forced a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. This is being exaggerated. Older people fall, homes get cold. My client went on a trip. The judge cut him off with a single sentence. Counsel, if your client went on a trip, why did she leave a note instructing someone else to handle the vulnerable adult? He looked down at the note Delia had submitted. Then he read it out loud. We're in Cancun, you handle Grandma. Silence spread through the room like a stain. The judge looked up at Elaine. Miss Weston, he said, did you leave this note? Elaine's chin lifted. Yes, she said, voice tight, because my daughter is dramatic and she loves to create scenes. My mother is stubborn. We were coming back. Dahlia's tone stayed flat. Your Honor, the house thermostat was shut off, the space heater was unplugged, the landline was removed, and the victim presented with hypothermia and dehydration. The judge's eyes narrowed. Landline removed, he repeated. Delia nodded. The police documented the missing phone location, and in the video, Ms. Weston states, quote, she can't call anyone if she can't reach anyone. Elaine's face changed fast, outrage first, then something closer to fear. That's not what I meant, she snapped. The judge's voice stayed calm. Then we'll hear what you meant, he said. He nodded toward the bailiff. Play the clip. The video audio filled the courtroom, tiny but unmistakable. My mother's voice, the heater cord, the phone being unplugged, the sentence that made the room go colder than my grandmother's living room ever did. She can't call anyone if she can't reach anyone. My father's voice in the background weak. Elaine. Then my mother again, dismissive. We'll be back in a few days, Tessa will handle it. The bailiff stopped the recording. No one moved, not even my mother's attorney. Judge Halverson leaned forward slightly like he was looking at my mother for the first time without her mask. "Miss Weston," he said, "this is not a probate strategy. This is potential elder abuse." Elaine's attorney stood abruptly. "Your Honor, we object. This is not the proper venue." The judge raised his hand again. "Sit," he ordered. The attorney sat, jaw clenched. The judge turned to Delia. "Relief requested," he said. Delia didn't overreach. She didn't make speeches. She asked for what the facts demanded. Immediate denial of the emergency petition, she said. Immediate appointment of my client as personal representative per the will. A court order prohibiting Miss Weston from contacting the vulnerable adult or interfering with care, and sanctions for a filing made in bad faith using a crisis Ms. Weston created. The judge didn't hesitate. "Denied with prejudice." "Curt," he said, striking the petition from the record. "Ms. Reed is appointed personal representative. Ms. Weston is barred from contacting June Reed or attempting to direct her care. Any future filings by Ms. Weston in this estate require permission from this court." My mother's face went rigid. "You can't stop," the judge said, and his voice was suddenly sharp enough to cut. "If you interrupt again, you will be removed." Elaine's mouth snapped shut, but her hands trembled at her sides. Then the EU judge looked toward the courtroom door where two plain officers were standing. "Nor," the judge didn't look at him. "Counsel, you may advise your client to stop speaking." My mother stood up anyway, unable to help herself. "This is my inheritance," she spat, voice rising. "She's stealing it from me." "He always bafe," the judge said without emotion. "Remove her." The bailiff stepped in. Elaine tried to pull back like she was offended by reality touching her, and then Detective Shaw did something that changed the air completely. "Allah Weston," he said, calm and loud enough for the room, "you are under arrest." My mother froze for a second. She looked genuinely confused, like consequences were something that happened to other people. "For what?" she hissed. "Felony elder neglect," Shaw said, "isolation of a vulnerable adult, tampering with a communication device, and witness intimidation based on your phone calls to hospital staff." Her attorney's face went pale. My father finally looked up, eyes wet and empty. My mother's voice cracked into something ugly. "You can't arrest me in court." Shaw didn't argue. "We can arrest you anywhere," he replied. "Turn around." As they cuffed her, she twisted her head toward me like she expected me to break, to beg, to fix it. I didn't. I sat perfectly still because my grandmother's hand on my wrist wasn't a plea for forgiveness, it was a handoff. "Finish it." Elaine was escorted out through the side door, not for drama, for control, for procedure. The judge turned back to the file like my mother shouting was just weather that had passed. "Miss Reed," he said to me, "I'm sorry, this is how your holiday began." I swallowed. "It won't end that way," I said quietly. He nodded once, then signed the letters that gave me authority over Grandpa's estate and immediate access to secure accounts, lock down property, and prevent interference. When court ended, Delia gathered our paperwork and held it out to me like it was armor with a stamp. "Now," she said softly, "no one can handle you." Back at the hospital, June's color had returned to her cheeks, not fully, but enough that her face looked like herself again, not like a shadow. She was awake when I walked in, eyes clearer than they'd been since I found her. I sat beside her and took her hand. "They came after you," she whispered. "I know," I said. Her eyes flicked to my face like she was searching for damage. "Did you tell?" she asked. I squeezed her fingers gently. "I didn't tell," I said. "I proved." Tears gathered at the corners of her eyes, but she didn't cry. She just exhaled like her body finally believed it was safe. Over the next weeks, the case didn't get smoothed over. It escalated the way it should have. The prosecutor charged my mother formally. She was denied immediate dismissal because the video, the hospital records, the utility usage drop, and the removed phone created a timeline that didn't need anyone's opinion. My father was offered a deal for cooperating. He didn't walk away clean, but he did walk into a courtroom and admit what he watched and failed to stop. The no contact order became permanent, and Grandma's discharge plan went through APS. She moved into a warm, monitored, assisted living facility where no one could unplug her safety with a smile. As for probate, Judge Halverson added sanctions and ordered my mother's attorney fees request denied outright. The estate was secured, Grandpa's wishes were honored, and the first Thanksgiving meal I ate that year wasn't at a table with people pretending. It was beside my grandmother's hospital bed, sharing a bland turkey sandwich from the cafeteria, both of us wrapped in warm blankets. She looked at me and said barely above a whisper, "You did what I couldn't." I shook my head. "You did," I told her, "you left me the key." A month later, June was stronger. The assisted living staff knew her medication schedule better than my mother ever did, and the fear in her eyes finally started to fade. My mother's beach photos disappeared from her page, but the court records didn't. Every time someone tried to minimize what happened, I didn't argue. I pointed to the same two things: the medical chart and the video clip of the heater unplugging. Some stories don't need narration when the evidence speaks. If you found your grandmother on the floor with the heat shut off and a note saying you handle her, what would you do first? Call family, call the police, or go straight to court? Drop your answer in the comments, and if you want more stories like this, hit like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.